Hey there, Steve Gamache with another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review. And what we're looking at this time is the Yahiko Sanjo series. This is the Shitogami or white number 2 Nashiji Nakiri, a 165mm knife. So as the name implies, this knife has a core hard cutting edge steel of Shitogami white paper number 2, reactive high carbon steel. Again, it is reactive. Heat treats about typically around 61 Rockwell on that. The construction is 3 layers. On either side of that hard core steel, you've got a soft iron, which is also reactive cladding. And we look a little closer, you'll see that the cladding does not cover the spine. You can actually see the layers in the spine here. This cladding is reactive in the core steel, so the entire knife is reactive and will patina and will rust if you let it sit wet, but it'll patina nicely as you start using it and help kind of put a protective oxide layer on there. We've got a protective Kudauchi or blacksmith finish on it as well. This does not, I don't think this has lacquer on it, so it's pretty much just raw, straight up. But really interesting finish on this. We'll take a look at some of that. The weight and dimensions will vary a bit from product to product. This one is 164 grams or 5.8 ounces, and the edge length, which is kind of the usable length, is about 165 or 6.5 inches. And the overall length on the whole thing with the handle is about 320 millimeters, 12.6 inches. Spine thickness, these tend to be a little thicker coming out of the handle, and then they thin out pretty quick. So above the back of the heel, I pulled it, measured it about 3.2 millimeters. That'll vary a little bit. But then it shrinks down pretty quick, and I got like 1.9, which is pretty thin for this style. And then it pretty much holds that all the way to the end here, which is typical of this style of knife. The blade height I measure, usually I measure these in 2 different spots. So at the back it's about 51.6 millimeters, and then about halfway across about 51.7. In other words, it's pretty close to the same height most of the way down the blade. The handle is a D-shaped, kind of right-hander oriented handle. Personally, as a lefty, I don't find the D-shape a problem for a pinch grip. Some people even like to put their thumb there if they're lefties, but as a righty, it's kind of meant to go in that crook of your hand there, kind of fit that a little bit. But again, I wouldn't let it sway you if you're a lefty necessarily. But the handles are cool. They're what they call burnt chestnut, and what they've done is they've got a buffalo horn ferrule, which is becoming a little less common these days, so that's a nice touch. And then they sand that down. That's the color variation to kind of meet the handle ferrule, and so you get a pretty smooth junction there, plus it looks cool. So it's a neat handle. The glue up is very tight, got lots of nice glue in there, nice and clean install, so it's very watertight. Circumference on this handle is about 72 millimeters or 2.9 inches where the two materials meet. And balance point, this is a Nakiri, so it's the blade's tall all the way down, so the balance point's right about there. And for me, that's really close to my pinch grip, so for a lot of people this is probably going to be fairly close to a pinch grip. You still get a little bit of kind of feel that the blade has some mass, which is good for this style of knife for chopping, but fairly neutral, pretty light, nimble feel. The let's get our kind of close-up beauty shot here. We do for our video covers. So as you can see, this one has the Kudauchi finish. It's called Nashiji. This really doesn't have much texture to it. Nashiji means pear skin, and so it's typically like a mottled texture. This doesn't have a whole lot of that. It does have vertical sanding marks. You can kind of see that on the finish. They've got hand chiseled kanji, which is very nice, hand engraved, and those are done after the fact, so they're pretty crisp, and you can see them. And they look really cool. There's your grind coming down from the blade sides to the core cutting edge steel. Right there, peeking through. Here's the left side of the blade as you'd be holding it. Again, there's your cladding line there, and then there's a shiny edge bevel on top of that. Fit and finish on these is pretty nice. They do a little bit of relief on the corners of the spine, so that it's not sharp. They do a relief on the corners of the choil, so that's not sharp. Out of the box edge, pretty sharp. I'll give it maybe 6 out of 10 on my scale, so it's pretty sharp out of the box. Shitogami will get very, very sharp, so it'll get just as sharp as your skills allow, so you can get these babies razor sharp, not a problem if you do your part. The blade, as you might imagine, is fairly stiff, which is typical of this style blade, and it's just nicely crafted. Let's look at the cutting board profile here. See what we got. So as you can see, this one's pretty flat, and Nakiris generally are flat. This one is got a pretty flat, got a little bit of spot there, but this will definitely do the trick. You don't necessarily want one that's dead flat, because then if you don't hit it exactly square like this, it'll start bouncing all over and you hit the tip and the back and the heel. So a little bit of belly in a Nakiri is not a bad thing at all, but pretty typical profile. The tip does have a bit of a rounding to it, so that means you can rock this if you wanted to. Not a problem. Some people like to do that. You could do tip draws with it as well. Not a problem there either. So gives you actually a fair amount of versatility, more than you might think. So just a nice package if you want an all-reactive blade, kind of old school style that's got some nice styling features and some hand engraved kanji, cool handles. This is a neat package. So this is the Yahiko Sanjo Shidogami or White's number 2 Nashiji Nakiri 165mm knife.